And welcome to the QCast. This is season 4, episode 27. I think that this is a really overdue guest and an overdue QCast. Folks, it is time to go to Grand Rapids, Michigan to coach Bill Sall, the head men's basketball coach of the 15-1 Calvin Knights. Coach Sall, we had about a 7-minute delay before the QCast today, so there were some IT issues on campus. Do you want to talk through those a little bit before we get going?
Well, my knowledge of computers is not all that good, so I kept on having a blank screen, and I know I have such a pretty face that you'd want to see me. So yeah, I finally got Phoebus in here, who usually takes care of everything. He's quality control. We got it done.
And it turned out to be the little slider thing at the top that
Yeah,
covers the camera, right?
yeah,
I should have helped you on that early on before you went down those other rabbit holes. But
yeah.
it's great to see you.
Hey,
I
great
didn't
to
want
see
to do it without having your face
you.
on the QCast, coach. In all seriousness, congrats on what is an incredible season, 15-1. You're 5-0 in the league. Gotta start off by asking you about this Hope game. I mean, Bill, 4,102 people in the building. I watched most of it up until when our game started. I mean, what an incredible atmosphere. I've seen some of the videos. Just talk first about like that rivalry and having 4,100 people at a D3 game and all of that stuff before we get into the game a little bit.
Yeah, it's been really cool to see. When COVID hit, we kind of did see a little bit of the fan attendance, obviously during that season, but then after that go down a little bit. But our administration, we got a game day crew here, did an amazing job. And here's the thing, from a student situation, it's the best student section I've ever seen. But
It was
we gave
unbelievable.
away tickets on Tuesday night and gave away pizza. They showed up in force. It's nice to have a football team now because you always get those guys out as well. And then that's just Calvin Hope, right? The amount of community support you get
Yeah.
from both places just lends itself to really packing the place out. And the amazing thing is it was horrible weather out. I mean,
Yeah.
snowing, cold, but just to see that arena packed like that, I mean, it gives your heart a flutter as you're starting that game for sure.
And we're in an era where I think you'd agree with this, and I don't have data on this, but if we go back like 20, 25 years, the leaders in attendance were always Hope, Calvin, Illinois Wesleyan, Worcester. Just change
Mhm.
the order every year. Maybe Stevens Point was in there. And I'm positive if I looked at the data that attendance at all levels of college basketball is down a pretty good percent.
Yeah.
I think it's because people are too busy on these things and whatever else, right? And so isn't it cool when we get these games in your building or ours where it looks like it's supposed to look? That's the first thing I thought is, isn't it great to see a D3 gym full?
Yeah. It feels like that's how it should be, right? And man, I've been in a lot of arenas and gyms where you could hear the pin drop because there's hardly anybody there. So to
Yeah.
get that atmosphere, and again, for our guys, I mean, look, they're here for a lot of reasons and a lot of good reasons, but one of them is to play in that game, right? And to be a part of a college basketball atmosphere of what it should be like. So I wish we could go back 25 years. I agree. The phone, I think live stream is awesome for all of us fans to actually watch really good basketball, but sometimes you can watch it in the comfort of your home without actually getting out there and actually seeing it all.
Yeah, there's no question. The ability to, like, maybe I won't go today. I'll just sit on my
Yeah.
couch and watch it. That's a large percent of that issue.
Right.
Wanted to ask you about the game in general. You won it 69-61. It's a really good Hope team.
Mhm.
They're big, they're skilled. I guess they look like every Hope team of all time.
Yeah.
They're a really good team. And I thought you guys did a good job of setting the tone in that game. Like the first 5-7 minutes, it felt to me like you were both teams were playing very hard, but you guys were very physical. You were very aggressive. You played tough, even when maybe the shots weren't falling right away. But like, talk about just setting the tone in that game and jumping out to a little bit of a lead.
I thought we did a great job of that. A little bit of it has to do if you got to dial it back from to last year where we lost two in a row to them, including
Yeah.
in the MIAA championship game. And that leaves a pretty bad taste in your mouth. And it's hard enough when your season ends. It's really hard when you lose to hope and then your season ends.
Sure.
And so that's been something that's been in the back of the mind of a lot of our guys, and we've even talked about it this summer. So I think that gave us an added edge going into this game. And we had not been defending particularly well here for a while. Had a lull, and we talked a lot as a team. I talked to a lot of guys individually. Is we needed to get back to us, what we do
Right.
well, and that, quite frankly, is defending and rebounding at a really high level. And I was just really happy for the guys to see them really accept that and go out and I agree. I think we just did a good job in those first 5 minutes of setting the tone.
Any extra pressure because you're playing at home? Like you got to protect home court is the saying. I think it's a true saying. I feel like sometimes in these big conference games, there's more pressure on the home team than the road team. Anything to that? And you had this huge crowd, and you had lost to them
Yeah.
there last year. Like anything to that?
Oh, I think huge, right? I mean, look, that was a must win for us.
Absolutely.
And you have to understand with Calvin and Hope. And I say this all the time. You at Calvin, you could win a national championship. And if over the course of the year you lost to Hope maybe once or twice, you'd have anybody come and say, "Hey, that was a pretty good year, but man, how did you lose to Hope? How did that happen?" So that game is really the first and foremost on everybody's minds. That's a fan, from a casual fan to a huge fan. So yeah, the pressure is there, and you have to perform under that pressure.
Want to talk about your team a little bit. It's a really complete group. I had a chance to see him play in person there twice at the Great Lakes Invitational. And I remember leaving Springfield thinking that's a national championship favorite. I still feel that way. So you've got this great, and I want to ask you about guys individually, but you've got this nice blend of the best big guy in Division Three. To me, the biggest mismatch in the country, and then some guys that can shoot it, but also some athletes, that can do a lot of different things. Just talk about the overall makeup of your team, and if you agree that it's really a very complete group.
I do. I like the makeup of our team. I mean, I think for us, it always comes down to on the front end, and any player would tell you this without a doubt. I mean, it's going to be, can you be in a situation where you can defend at a really high level? Can you play hard, but then can you do all the other components of what makes you a really good basketball player? And having Jalen, look, for me, that's kind of one of those once in a lifetime type players that you get, that has
Absolutely.
size, athleticism, is a great kid. But also someone that's a very willing passer. He does want to see that, where it has to go on a double. And I think if you compare our team to last year, the one thing that we did struggle a little bit is we didn't shoot the ball that well. Now, we're still not where we were here in December, but it's going to come. I mean, we have good enough shooters that's going to be part of it. So you have to have complementary players that within their own right are skilled. And I think that's the one nice thing we have, is that those guys all do their own thing. I mean, and again, Jalen's been great, but you have to talk about Uchenna Egekeze. I mean,
Yeah.
an amazing defender, probably the hardest working kid that I've ever had on a roster. I mean, what you see in a game is exactly how he approaches practice. And he sets that tone. And then, again, kind of what he gives you on the offensive side is someone that again can get downhill and get a bucket. He scores in so many different types of ways. And then, around him, just really a group of guys that are committed to winning, which to
Right.
me, this group is so much fun to coach because of that, right? I mean, it's really hard to check the ego at the door
Right.
and still play with the confidence you need to play at. And we just have a group of guys that are committed to doing it the right way.
You mentioned Jalen Overway, 6'10", 250 center, 19 points, 10 rebounds, 2 assists. He really is something that doesn't exist too much anymore. You know, like
Mhm.
the list of guys like him in Division 3. Well, I think he's in his own category, and then there's maybe a tier two of guys that are, 6'7" and mobile and great players. But he's like a throwback D3 guy to when I was at Illinois Wesleyan and when you were at Calvin. And it always fascinates me to figure out how special players landed where they did. I believe at the Great Lakes Invitational, I heard the story a little bit, but just for the folks on the QCast, like how the heck do you land Jalen Overway? What's the story there?
Well, first off, a lot of hard work. I think in his high school season, I might have gone to pretty much every game that he played,
Wow.
to know that we wanted him badly. I think if you look at it over the whole span of it, it comes down to a couple of things. You know, his dad is a Calvin alum, right? Played basketball here. So there's an affinity and a love for what Calvin basketball is all about. Quite frankly, with how things have worked with the portal and with transfers and fifth year guys, there's just not as many Division 2s that actively recruit, high school seniors.
Right.
And so he had a few offers, but none of them were like really good, right? Um, and then, to Jalen's credit, in high school, he was 6'10", but he was also about 300 pounds.
Right.
And he really struggled to get up and down the floor. And, he made a big commitment really after his senior year of getting himself in shape for college basketball. So he came in
Right.
at 250 pounds. He lost about 50 pounds during that time. So he really developed on his own from his senior year going into his freshman year. And so, when it came down to the end, he had a couple of offers from some schools, but it's a tight family. They really love it to be local. And, in the end, he thought this would be the best place for him. And we readily agree.
Yeah, and you mentioned like he's a once in a however many years type guy. You think you get one of these kids early in your stint at Calvin, and we could be looking back 15 years from now and saying like, wow, remember that guy,
Mhm.
which we will.
Yeah.
So it really is he's an amazing talent, and he distorts the game because everyone goes into it having to figure out what are they gonna zone you? Are they gonna double them?
Hmm.
Like everyone's just trying to have to figure that out first. And it's such a tough matchup. You mentioned Uchenna Egekeze, the 6'4" senior, and that was another huge recruiting win. I remember when he was a senior because I was following us recruiting Ryan Soroka, but I kept hearing like this other kid he was down to Wheaton and Calvin. I don't know if that's right, but it sounds right.
Yeah.
Like think about like what he has meant, build to your program, and like what a great complementary piece to what you have now in Overway, who's a sophomore. But he has really meant a lot to you guys on both ends of the floor.
Oh, for sure. I mean, and he sets the tone. That's the thing. I mean, I tell him all the time, look, how you approach a game, how you go out and the energy that you display, which he does just an amazing job of, literally just takes it to another level for all of us, right? And I think that's the big thing about it all is that, if we can manage to get that piece of the equation done, man, it makes a world of difference. And, along with that, it's another really interesting recruiting story. So there was a young man by the name of Luke Sheffers who was a really good player, and we were recruiting him quite hard. And Uchenna played in the same AAU team, right? So I really didn't even know who Uchenna was until that summer, and had a chance to see him play a couple times. Like, wow, I love the energy of that kid. And so we kept in contact, but again, at that, just like any kid, there was some other things going on. And, Uchenna, even in the first year, he's a very shy guy. I mean, it takes a little bit to get a couple of words out of him.
Sure.
And then he's very different now. He's kind of grown into that role of really being a pretty good leader. Um, but I'll never forget, after the season, that's when, we had shutdowns and everything
Yeah.
else going on. And so he came with his family, and by the way, his older brother is a really good player, still playing overseas right now. And the whole family came on the visit. And we talked a lot. We talked about what Calvin could do for him as an education and as a player. And we were desperate to have someone that could fit his position. He could come here and I really felt start from day one. And, between him and his dad, there was a lot of conversations, but, again, thankfully, he decided that Calvin was the right spot.
Yeah, he's been great this year. 12 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. Probably most of what he does really isn't box score stuff either.
It isn't. No.
Yeah, I mean, most of what he does doesn't show up. Um, Owen Varnado, your 6'6" sophomore, is a huge piece of the puzzle in that has made the most threes on the team. So obviously, with the way teams have to defend Overway, you have 3 really good shooters on the perimeter, and Varnado, Bolt, and Wrestler, and some other guys. But Varnado, he's a pretty unique player too, because he's more than just a shooter. Like talk about your sophomore there, Owen Varnado.
Another it's great with Owen in that, he continues to really take his game to other steps, right? Really, really good athlete and a really good defender. When he came in, probably wasn't the greatest 3-point shooter, but wow, has he really worked at that part of his game.
Yeah.
And so you've seen that part really blossom. And again, he's another guy that really just gives a ton of energy when he's out there. He plays with some emotion. We always talk about the difference between being emotional and playing with emotion, but he just brings an element of emotion that just kind of carries itself through. But again, in the span of now the last 3 games before this one, where again we had some tight games down the stretch, he's made some huge offensive plays, a big 3 at Olivet, a couple of big finishes at Adrian. So it's just been really neat to see his progression. And again, it's kind of the unique thing about this team. We have a lot of guys that are still sophomores.
Right.
So, they're still a little wet behind the ears as far as really, having those game rep experiences. But it's really been neat to see him, and it's the one thing about, when you talk about having a big guy in the post, right? It's a lost art. I mean,
Right.
so we have to start, like when Jalen got it, we had to start just how to pass the ball to the post, because look, from high school to AAU, there is no back to the basket guy.
Right.
So to actually play with someone that can do those things, it's an education, and it takes some time for everyone to really get a good feel for what you have to do.
I mentioned Bolt and Wrestler. There's a guy though that's coming on here, this freshman kid, Jordan Scott. The last I've been noticing him in the box score more and more and more. I went back and looked at, yeah, his minutes have been way up in the last like 5 or 6 games. He has scored now 11, 12, and 12 in the last 3. I always think it's such a jolt of energy when all of a sudden you have a freshman come in doing things. It adds something to the mix. Talk about Jordan Scott a little bit.
Jordan's been great for us, right? And I think as teams you always have to adjust, right? So as teams have really now with Jalen to come really hard on a double, we have tried to adjust our offense a little bit, because again, it just can't be him in the post. It just clogs everything up. And there's just nowhere to really roam.
Right.
And Jordan is just a really good playmaker. I mean, he can get downhill, does a really good job in the ball screen, and gives us kind of an added element. And, I think that's always interesting with freshmen, right? So he comes in and he's trying to adjust the pace and the speed. He's from a really small school by Ann Arbor, Plymouth Christian. It's always harder for those guys because they really never seen college pace. So it took them a while, but I think you always see the best out of freshmen when you turn the page into the new year.
Sure.
And they kind of suddenly get a feel. And he came out when we were down at Trine after a tough loss to Platteville, and we played Barry, who's actually a really good team, and really made a couple of huge plays. And that confidence that he gets, and now he sees it, and then we've been really able to insert him into a spot where he gives us just some added offense off the bench, and it's been great to see.
Wanted to ask you, Bill, a little bit about the transition from D2 back to D3. I think everyone knows that you were a great player at Calvin. You were a 2-time MIAA MVP, a 2-time All-American. You were on great teams. I think your senior year team went to the Final Four. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
So you were on great Calvin teams, and then you were into Division II for quite a while, right? You were at Ferris State. Most recently, you were at Northern Michigan. So the decision to come back to your alma mater, I mean, to me, that just couldn't have been a no-brainer, right? You're at the Division II level. What was it that drove the decision to kind of come back home?
It's interesting, but it's like this has always been home, right? I mean, Calvin has always had a special place for me. Being here as a student, not only is the growth as a player and being on a team, but growth as a student, growth in so many different ways by the mentorship received here. And my kids would always ask when they were younger, was like, what's your dream job, right? I mean, if you get a job, Michigan, Central Michigan, and I always told them, hey, if Calvin opens up at some point, I'd love the opportunity to come back and coach here. And in all reality, that is, this place has been such a special part of me and who I am. To come back and actually coach here is just a true blessing.
What's it been like in terms, I guess maybe just compare, it's maybe a loaded question, but compare the experiences. You got really used to Division II, and then I think jumping back into Division III, you kind of have to like reset and relearn. You've been away from it for a while, but what's been your experience now in your fifth season on like what Division III is now, and comparing it to what you were doing in Division II?
Well, one thing you learn quickly is that recruiting's way harder.
Sure.
I mean, it's always nice to have you like a guy and have a full ride scholarship in the back pocket.
Right.
So, I think, that relationship driven piece of recruiting is such a huge element. And in a lot of ways, I think refreshing, right? Because you really get to know the player, you really get to know the players' families. And in the end, that recruit is coming here, to be a basketball player, but far more concerned about what is this
Yeah.
going to do for me academically? What is this environment going to be like for me socially? How am I going to be able to adapt to what Calvin has to offer far outside of what basketball is? And then when you talk about D3, this is the one thing that to me is refreshing coming back. Look, we have guys that love the game of basketball. This is not a means to an end. This is not something that, you're doing because you have a scholarship and this is what you're supposed to do. You're doing it because you love the team, you love the game, you love to compete. And for me, that enjoyment of what even practice looks like, what day-to-day life is like with these guys is awesome. And I do love the fact that we have guys on our team, trust me, that love this game just as much as I do. But we have also guys that love it because they're on a team, right? They love it
Right.
because, they're a part of the program. They love it because their friends are on the team. And so there's varying degrees there. And I also love the fact that so many of our guys are just not based completely on just being a basketball player, right? I mean, they're involved in different student organizations. Academically, they are here because they want the degree. They want to do the things necessary. And it's not to say that at D2 that isn't the case. It certainly is. But I do think you're getting someone that loves this game, loves everything, but it doesn't make it the main component of exactly who they are.
Yeah, really well said. And we talk about that a lot on the show, and I always like hearing perspectives on that YD3 piece. Another thing I thought was a YD3 thing was during the Great Lakes Invitational, Ryan Whitnable hosted kind of a coaches social just in the hotel like bar area. So you had some of the best coaches in the country just hanging out, having a beer or two. And I remember we realized that your first game as the head coach at Calvin was at Illinois Wesleyan.
Yeah.
You guys won, and to see Ron Rose talking to Derek DeVries
Yeah.
about lighting up the Titans to the point where Ron Rose said it literally changed the way that Illinois Wesleyan defended a ball screen because of how bad Derek lit up the Titans. Like that whole scene. That's kind of a YD3 moment, just a bunch of guys having a beer and hanging out, coach.
And that's another part that I've just enjoyed so much is the camaraderie of the coaches. Um, it's just at a different level. And, it's just so funny with Ron, because I'd never met Ron before. Right. And so, you know, we're in that game. And I mean, Ron's as big a competitor as there is, as far as, in a basketball game. And so, we're both in the sidelines, we're both going crazy, trying to win at the best of our abilities. And, I think it was that spring I was at a recruiting event. He was there. And I was like, man, that is one of the nicest human beings I've ever met in my life. So it's just so cool to see, the coaches as a whole, finding that fraternity of D3 coaches are really supportive, but I think just do a great job again of making this a community that really appreciates one another.
You'll be playing in the Great Lakes Invitational again next year. In fact, you guys are hosting it, which is going to be unbelievable. Scheduling has been a big thing. You mentioned like last year, you guys got left at the table. I mean, there is no question in real life that the Knights were one of the best 20 at large options to take. You didn't get in over numbers, right? Over the strength of schedule. So you guys have committed a lot to scheduling. I mean, I'm looking at who you've played. I might miss someone here, but you played at Great Lakes Invitational where you got Marietta. You played La Crosse, Wheaton, St. Norbert, Stevens Point, Platteville, Barry. Not all of those teams have had their normal seasons, which is the other crapshoot of schedule. When you schedule Wheaton, you think Wheaton's going to win 18, 19, 20 games. Maybe the same with some of those others, but the commitment to scheduling and getting that strength of schedule, getting the numbers up, is that something that was a focus for you guys heading into this year?
Absolutely. You are right. It's tough because you're hoping that your schedule is good, but you never know what happens with the team from year to year. I think on a twofold thing. Number one, we have and will continue to try to, get a schedule that really makes it as competitive as you possibly can. I mean, here's the reality, right? I mean, there are times you look at your schedule and go, oh my goodness, we have 11 games non-conference and we could be 6-5.
I know all about that.
Which you don't want to always be in that fear of it, but it's like, that's what you have to do. I mean, I've learned that, and I've talked to a lot of people about it, because look, that's what you need to do if you want to be able to get there. The other thing that has been really neat to see is our conference itself has really upped their game. We've had, of course, Trine and Hope and us have had really good non-conference seasons, but you look at Alma and Albion, Kalamazoo, all did their job of really making their schedules competitive against really good teams. And it's been great to see the growth of the MIAA this past year. And with the coaches that we have here, I really see that continuing.
Talking about the MIAA for just a little bit, it is a good league this year with Calvin, Trine, Hope. Obviously, there's some other strong teams. That's your top three right now. In my top 25 ballot, I have Trine slightly ahead of Calvin. I flipped it after the Platteville, that Platteville beat you guys and then Trine beat them. And I've had that order since then. Now we're just splitting hairs because I think I have both way, way, way at the top. But Trine gives the MIAA a legitimate second national power, and Hope seems really good to me. Like when I watch Hope, they should have beaten Whitewater. They should have beaten Platteville. Talk a little bit, Bill, about like where the league is this year and how good the top is.
Well, I think the top, quite frankly, is about as good as it's ever been. And, you mentioned those two teams. I mean, it's, thank goodness we got one in. We did beat Hope, but we got those guys with 3 other games. And, each and every one of those I know is going to be just a complete dogfight. But I think what you see on the other side of it is, man, every team is playing hard. We went down to Albion, and it's a tough place to play, and they gave us everything we could have. Sam Hargraves at Olivet, who, my goodness, he had an amazing tough time, because I think he's lost 5 games and it's by a total of 20 points. Right. So, I mean, they're young, but they're playing incredibly well. Elma, is another squad that just has just a lot of youth, but exuberance, and man, they play so doggone tough. So, I think that's what's been really neat for me to see is just the growth of some young coaches really doing some great things. And I think from top to bottom, making this conference one that has to be reckoned with. And that's what we love to see.
You've got Alma coming up Saturday. So tomorrow you get Alma, and then Wednesday you host Trine. Every night out, the rest of the way becomes big because there isn't any room for error. Bill, when you look at the region that you're playing in, I'm looking at the picture right now, and John Carroll, Case, Trine, Mount Union, Calvin, St. Vincent, they haven't lost a game.
Right.
Now, they're going to scrap to get ranked because of their SOS, but St. Vincent, Carnegie Mellon, who has won, so they just beat Case and NYU. And teams like Marietta and Hope and Wittenberg right now are not even really close to regionally ranked. That's how good the region is. So I don't know. Do you pay attention to that regional stuff, or do you just say, let me know where I'm regionally ranked when it comes out? Like, do you pay attention to that stuff?
I a little bit, right? I mean, I think it's awesome. I mean, yourself, the Snyder boys, Ryan, you've done an amazing job of really making D3 relevant. And you have to understand, we have to talk a little bit about it because my guys are on Twitter looking at it all, right? So, I mean, I'd love to do the coach speak of, well, we'll just wait until the regional rankings happen. Well, then you're not in tune with where your players and what they're looking at as well. I do think a little bit of us right now, and this is again coach speak, but taking one game at a time because, I think for a little bit here in January, we've started to feel the pressure that you have to win every game, right? And it's like you don't want to. I mean, look, we're still doing this because it's fun. We're still doing this because we love to compete. I think I saw one of your tweets from Ron Rose, and it's like, hey, if we lose, the sun is still going to come up tomorrow. I mean, yes, it's a big deal, but it's not that big a deal. And so, I think, man, you have to be able to understand, hey, we're going to give it our best. We're going to go out there and play at the level we can play at, but let's not be consumed with where we are and what we're doing as well.
It's a great point. Like, the guys don't care any less in Division III than they do in Division I or II.
No way.
I remember I was out in California with our guys watching them lose these tough games to Redlands and Calou. And I mean, just they're on a trip where they're supposed to be having fun, and just how dejected. And then they lose to Stevens Point, and I'm watching a video stream, and I could just see like how tough that's the thing they were going through. And so that I hope people have that appreciation. Like, these guys are in this deeply at this level. Just a couple other questions I got to ask you about this Zac Snyder character. I don't even know what to say about this, Bill. Last year, you went on Hoopsville and you called the guy out because on the pick'ems of the game of the week, the guy picks Hope with the points, right?
Yeah.
So you addressed that. I thought you handled it very professionally. So here we are the next year, the next pick'em. And what does Zac do? The spread was 2, and your guy, Zac Snyder, takes Hope again. Like, what? I just got to let you comment on that, really.
First off, I'm aghast.
Me too.
Along with it, and I had it just, I reached out to Matt. And I said, what's your brother doing? I mean, what's your brother doing right now? It's like, I know you're trying to pick wins, right? I know this is a big deal in the DataCast, but it's like, come on. I mean, doesn't fandom come into play somewhere?
I don't know.
So, I'm looking forward to me and Zac having a little face-to-face meeting at some moment.
Yeah.
And just really kind of seeing where his allegiances might lie. I mean, I mean, I'm hoping he's still with us. Right. I mean,
I think
I'm hoping he's on our side somewhere along the line. But it's like, Zac, come on, buddy. I mean,
couldn't believe it. It wasn't like the spread was 8, yeah. So 2, but hey, I just had to ask that. I like to tackle the tough issues on the QCast, as and I had to ask that. I also want to ask just a couple more things. I thought it was cool that the Hope Calvin rivalry game, you got two head coaches that played against each other in
Yeah.
this thing, right? So Greg Mitchell was class of 89 and you were 90. What was it like back in the day facing Greg as a Hope Hooper?
Well, Coach Mitch, when we played, it was interesting because he's a shooter and he could shoot the blood out of the ball. And so we never really matched up against each other. He didn't like to get in the trenches all that much. But he was an integral part of those teams. And look, I think that's what's really cool, I think, for both of us, is that we've been through it as a player, right? Because and I will say this, back in the day when we were in the old Knoll Crest and they used to play at the Civic, the Nord and DeVos are just beautiful arenas, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in my opinion, the best you're
Yeah,
going to find in
absolutely.
all of Division III. I mean, they're amazing
Yep.
places. But they're not the cracker boxes of old, right? Where, when you would come here at the Civic, you could not even communicate with somebody 5 feet away. It
Right.
was so loud in
Right.
there. And they just packed everybody in there like sardines. It was ridiculous. So, but those elements, and we had just some tight games, some ridiculously close finishes. I think in those years, it came down to the last possession almost every time we played. So yeah, we have a lot of history. And it's really unique to see. And like I said, he was a really good player, but he's done an amazing job there at Hope of making that team really, really sound.
Yeah, I would look for them to have a big finish to the season. They're very talented. One final question, then I'll see if you've got anything that we missed. But what a great tournament to start next season. The Sikma Invitational in Bloomington, Illinois. Check out this field, Coach Sall. We have 4 teams that are currently in first place in very good leagues. Calvin, first place in the MIAA. Platteville, first place in the WIAC. Cal Lutheran, first place in the SCIAC, and Illinois Wesleyan, first place in the CCIW. I know we're only here to talk about this season, but that's going to be a pretty fun way to kick off next season with a very talented Calvin team.
Yeah, I don't know what I'm thinking, but we're gonna do it. It was really funny because Ron called me a couple years ago and he needed someone in, and I'm like, well, our schedule is full. And then I made the mistake of that saying, hey, look, 2 years from now, give me a call, we'll come. Because it's, again, what a cool event. I mean, it's just in the top-notch talent every year in that thing. And so then he called me and I'm like, oh, that's right, I did say that I would do this. So I'm like, okay, I'm a man of my word. We're in. He failed to tell me who else was in.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's going to be a great start to next year. And like you said, I think, man, the more that you can play top tier teams, and the more that I just think it's great for the sport. I think it's great for D3. The GLI. I mean, there's just so many high end tournaments now that you get to see teams play against each other that you normally just would never happen. So really cool event. Excited to be there, but yeah, we got a few things to do yet this year.
Yeah, we do. We do. The 6'10", 250 Jalen Overway versus 6'10", 240 Harrison Wilmson. And I keep telling the Snyders, I feel like that matchup's going to happen this year. I feel like at opening weekend, it's going to be Calvin versus Illinois Wesleyan. And I keep thinking that that's going to happen, Coach. I'm kind of rooting for that. We'll see.
I don't root for it at all. So
just want us
no,
to get in. We're in a dicey position.
Listen. Let's try to keep that one away. I'll tell you this. If we're both fortunate to do some good things, and it's a couple weekends into it, then yes, but not in the first.
Yeah,
first
I'll just take being on that bracket somewhere. We're in some trouble. Coach, this has been awesome. Again, I feel like it was like a couple seasons overdue, but I was excited. I asked for your cell phone before the Hope game, and I told the Snyders, I said, as soon as the game ends, I'm going to text Coach and get him on the show. He doesn't know it right now, but the game it has big implications. MIAA, regional rankings, and the QCast. I didn't want that pressure on you, Coach, before the game. But it's on all seriousness, this has been great. And Certainly want to give you last words. You've got Calvin Nation tuning in, D3 Nation. What would you leave the fans with here today, Bill?
First off, for just our Calvin fans, it has been so awesome to see, and I don't think they even realize how much us as coaches and players appreciate, coming in the support that we've seen. And obviously the Calvin Hope game, but we played Kalamazoo in our second league game, and had over 1,600 fans here with no students. I mean, the students weren't back yet. So that's the community of Calvin, and man, we appreciate that, and we'd love to see it continue. It is just awesome to be back in D3. It really is. I've yes been at different levels, but to me, when you just look at what the philosophy is to what you have for the impact for your own student athletes, it's just the rewards are so great, and I'm so thankful to be a part of it. And hey, thanks to you. I think it's really cool, these sorts of not the QCast, but what a lot of you guys do on your own because you love it, and to give back a little bit, man, it's much appreciated. And it's really cool to see, I think, the growth in part to what you guys do of really D3 being relevant. I mean, how many times do you see D3 hoops trending on Twitter? It's just
Right.
really, really cool to see.
Yeah.
And, thank you from the bottom of my heart for all that you do for D3 hoops.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. And, I always, Dave McHugh, Hoopsville kind of started the whole,
Yeah.
show trend. And then you got the D3 Datacast that comes out every Monday mornings. QCasts are usually weekly. And a lot of other people are doing great stuff. And so D3 is in a great spot right now with both the quality of play. I think the coverage that goes on, we're in a really good spot. Folks, that's Bill Sall. He's the head coach at Calvin, and the Knights are rolling. They're 15-1. They're 5-0 in the MIAA. They're way up there in the rankings. They're ranked number 4 currently, and they are one of the teams that absolutely can be in Fort Wayne in March. So, Bill, I hope to see you along the way in the NCAA tournament. I really feel like I'm going to, and I wish you the best of luck the rest of the way.
Well, thank you. I hope so. Right. I mean, we got a lot of games to play yet. We got a lot of things to figure out. We're trying to see if we can continue to improve and do that every day. But I do. I really love this team. I love these guys. And looking forward to seeing where this takes us this year. And thanks again. And hey, go Knights.
Go Knights is right. Thanks a lot, Bill. We'll talk real soon. Thank
Okay.
you.